I'm on the phone with Leah Hennessey from the band Hennessey. Leah, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
You are welcome. All right, you have a brand new album out. It's called EP1. Now, is it Hennessey EP1? Does the EP stand for just EP or is it episode one?
It's funny. People keep asking that, and I,
Well,
I
yeah.
really didn't. I really didn't think about it being episode, but it makes sense that it is episode because I have a lot more. I guess I have a lot more like experience in episodic kind of filmish, fake television kind of stuff than I do in releasing my own music. So like, I guess it does make sense for me to think of it as episode one. And I've always really liked the notation of like for episodes, the EP.01 or CSO1E02.
Yeah,
Like
right.
I'm someone who I grew up with no television, and so my television experience has been a lot like searching for stuff online and watching like weird British sitcoms, and that's how that is always written. I don't know, it's a tangent, but I like the idea that it's an episode, and if it is, it's like a teaser episode.
Now, talking about your growing up, you grew up in what you described as normal, being on the road, doing your homework backstage. For those of you that don't know, David Johansen is your stepdad, which would explain why you were on the road a lot. Did you go to regular school or were you
Yeah, I
homeschooled?
was, I wasn't on the road like some people. I had my fair share of time in the tour bus and trekking around, and I got to travel sometimes, uh, and go to like I got to travel and see some places with the band, but I was mostly home at school and living my own life, which was weird in other ways. But no, I was like a total.
In what
Um,
ways?
well, I was like a total like school-centered nerd in a lot of ways, and my whole childhood was really about reading and writing and listening to music, I guess. But then also I had this like crazy cast of characters around. When it was just me and my mom, and then when David came into our lives. So I guess my life has always been kind of a mixture of like introverted, nerdy, private obsession, and then like wild, wild people and chaotic
Yeah, it's
socializing.
it's almost like opposite sides of the spectrum because
Yeah.
what I've noticed in my research of you is you do a lot of reading and you're very well read. I've heard you use words I don't even understand or know what they mean. So don't get too deep
It's
on me
fun
with
to use
words
funny
here.
words, yeah. It's funny.
Now, why no TV? Was that just something your mom was like, "No, we're not going to have a TV"?
Well, it's really weird that I keep bringing this up because I didn't. It's really like I feel like doing interviews is really like it's like a little free therapy or something. You get to like you get to like muse on things you don't think about otherwise. But I don't know why it's become so central to my identity that I didn't have television. But I think it really was the key to why I lived such a old-fashioned or like anachronistic life, and like my exposure to like pop culture and stuff, I got that at school, but it seemed very alien. And I really, as a kid, defined myself against whatever was happening. And that kind of, it's taken me a long time to get over that kind of like very, I guess it's like a normal teenage preteen thing, but I started it really early. And that feeling of like who I am is that I don't like the Spice Girls, and being that kid who's like, I don't fuck with that stuff, and like I care about Narnia and Star Trek and and just being like so committed to being such a nerd and being so aggressively against contemporary pop culture from such a young age, and I missed out on a lot because of it. And I realized that when I was older. And since then, I've really tried to approach pop culture with like an open mind and try to see the good in whatever's happening, and not be such a like perpetual teenage contrarian,
Right.
because it's like, and now I'm like, I feel so giddy, and it feels so crazy for me to say like, yeah, I really like Billie Eilish, because I do,
Sure.
I think she's great, and I think she's really inspiring, and I'm like, oh, I wish I had Billie Eilish when I was a kid, but I would have fucking hated Billie Eilish when I was a kid. So,
Right, right.
I understand. But I'm trying now to get over that, because I definitely came into this world with a lot of contempt prior to investigation, as they say.
Well, what I find, about what you just said, very interesting, starting with the, you were nerdy, according to you, and reading books and all that other stuff, because you come off, or you are, I will say, so fucking hip, where I'm like, whoa. I'm like, you know what I mean? I was like, this woman really, like, she's got it going on here.
Well, I think a lot of the hippest people, I think there are some people, I got a lot to say about hip. I think there are some people who
and
are
hip is a broad
naturally-
word. It's probably
it
not
is.
even the right word.
No,
Let's
no,
say
I think
cool.
it is. Cool, but I think, I think there's some people who are, just innately cool. Like literally, David, my stepdad. Like, David is he's just a cool guy.
Yeah, that he is.
He's never thought about it too much. I'm in the process of interviewing him, actually, for a film project we can talk about later if we want. But I've really tried to crack the surface of the self-consciousness with him, and he's just who he is, and he wakes up looking like that, acting like that, talking like that. That's who he is. There's no other guy, really. I mean, there's other guys down there, but they're all the same kind of cool guy. And some people have an ease and kind of lack of self-consciousness and grace with which they move through the world. And some of them are, iconic for being that way, and some of them are just, people in your neighborhood or whatever. But I really don't feel like one of those people, and I think that there's definitely a coolness in just doing things the way you want to do them, and being creative and adventurous, and that's real for me, and that's not like a put on. But I also think there's like I think there's other people who are hip or who are cool who come off that way through like a lot of I don't know. I want to say like study or irony or self-awareness, or I don't know. I just think like for me it's a game to put that on, or to try to communicate that way, and to try to. It's interesting. I guess it's interesting for me to think about it, and if it's interesting for you to think about coolness, you're not one of those innately cool people.
Right. That makes sense.
You know what I mean? Like, I think some people just got it like that, and you know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's those of us who are, students of cool.
Now, you started doing some acting, and correct me if I'm wrong on anything, but you started doing some acting around 2012, and in 2013, you started with your friends Gigi.
Yeah.
In 2013. Now, am I correct in saying that obviously you starred in it, but did you write and direct it as well?
Yeah, I didn't direct it, but I did everything else. I wrote it. I co-wrote the songs with my friends who I continue to collaborate with. EJ, who's also in Hennessey.
EJ O'Hara.
He directed Gigi, and and my friends Emily and Ruby and I all kind of created it together, and we're not doing Gigi now, but we are all still, we're a pretty like tightly knit group.
Now,
of
how long did
collaborators.
Gigi go?
I don't know, 6 years or something.
That's what I thought.
It's so long. We did it for so long, and you know, it was at this time where like we got, I don't know what it at this time means, but I just like hit a block because it's so intense talking about Gigi because we really put everything into it, and I guess that the reason I always characterize myself as nerdy, it's not that I think I'm so smart or intellectual or know so much. It's really just that I'm so obsessive, and I think that to me is has a nerdiness to it. You could call it passionate, but I get very obsessive. And with Gigi, I was obsessed with making this show for years and years, and it consumed my every waking thought and moment of my life. And it was this it was really our attempt at doing like a BBC kind of sitcom, but
Right.
on our own terms, and with no money and no network and no institutional support of any kind. And I was really obsessed with TV shows like The Young Ones or Ab Fab, or later like The Mighty Boosh. I loved these, and especially I loved these British comedy shows that integrated music and comedy, and visual comedy and fashion, and like a total world. Like that was really what I wanted to do, and we did it. And you know, it was my dream to have a show like that. And even though the show was only on YouTube, we did have a show, and some people watched it, and I really learned how to write songs doing that, because in the show, the band is called Gigi, and the band plays a lot of like different kinds of songs, and there's different kinds of music in the show, and so it was like this really kind of crash course in songwriting that we put ourselves through, where we'd say like, okay, now this song is going to have to be like a Loretta Lynn style country song. So then we know none of us are really musicians, like instrumentalists. You know, none of us are,
Right.
or none of us know anything about music theory or composition, and so we'd just be like, okay, it's got to be like a country song. Let's look up the kind of chords they put in those songs. You know, like really just starting from nothing. And we wrote some amazing songs that way.
Okay, now let me ask you this, because I read somewhere that you said that the music that you wrote for Gigi were basically fake songs, and you said that your life was not worth living if you weren't putting time into writing songs. Some part of you would die. So do you feel that, explain that to me, how you feel that they were fake songs?
You know, because, and you know, as I've gone further with my quote unquote real songs, I have recognized that, you know, all songs are a mixture of real and fake, and it's not that simple. But at the time that I was writing these Gigi songs, you know, we were writing them in character, and we were writing them to have an effect. And it wasn't so much that they were not from my perspective, or that they weren't about my real feelings, because a lot of the time they actually were. But it was, you know, each line in a Gigi song is constructed like a joke. And it's all designed
for
to
the
have
show.
Impact. Yeah, and
So
to
that
make
makes
someone
sense.
laugh.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was really like the songs in the show were really like, we would write them collaboratively, and we were really like, it really got into some very like, what I imagine like brill building songwriting teams, how they talk. Like we'd be, you know, we'd write a line and we'd go like, funny? Is that funny? No? Yes? Okay, how can we make it funnier? Like, does that work? Is that too stupid? That's so stupid it works, you know? And we'd have these kind of analytical conversations about songwriting. And I love to work that way. I love to write songs that way. It's so fun. There's nothing that's more fun in a way than that kind of work, because it's a game. especially with people you love and you trust their, sense of humor and sensibility or whatever. So we went really far with that. And there was just a part of me that was like really yearning, like desperately, desperately yearning for, I hate to use the word authentic, but like a more authentic form of expression.
Well, no, it makes perfect sense because, basically you're writing them for the show. So you weren't
Right.
writing them for yourself. Now, I want to ask you about in 2014, you had a band called Pornography.
Mm-hmm.
7 minutes in Heaven, which I read somewhere clocked in at a mere 7 minutes. Now,
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the gimmick.
tell me about Pornography. Was that an actual band?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing because that was really like that was somewhere between a real band and a fake band. That was like a very strange situation. I won't get into it too much. I have very complicated, mixed feelings about Ryan Adams, who I was in the band with, and we started this band together on a whim, kind of as a joke. I'm addicted to jokes, as I've just revealed. But I kind of thought it was more of a joke than he did, I think. And at the time, like I was getting into writing my own songs, and I told him that, and I told him I was like writing these really sad, kind of folky songs, and he was like, well, why don't you sing in my kind of punk band? And to me, like, someone like Ryan and his friends, like, having a punk band, it seemed like a joke,
right?
I think like but I'm like a purist, and to me, like, some middle-aged millionaire guys
Yeah.
having a punk band in the basement of their friend's club that they own is like, it seemed like kind of a joke.
Yeah.
But I
Makes
guess
sense.
it wasn't a joke for them, and it became not a joke for me because once I got in there, I really opened up, actually, and I started just like letting loose with like the stupidest, most unconscious ideas coming out, and it was really so much fun. And we actually, the EP is available, but we recorded a lot more music than that, and we made like I don't know if it's a double album, but we made like a long album at Electric Lady that year, that has some like really fantastic songs that I'm still really proud of.
Good.
That I don't think will ever see the light of day for complicated reasons. But like, yeah, that was kind of a bridge for me between, real and
Gigi
fake.
and where you are now.
Yeah, and it like, it helped me to let go of my ideas of, making something good.
Right.
Make something kind of shitty and have fun, and then realize that maybe there was something really precious in what I thought was shitty, I guess. And and it was like it was a really good learning experience.
Okay, now you make no bones about it. You are heavily influenced by David Bowie.
Oh yeah, obsessed.
Obsessed, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say I resisted bringing him up earlier when I was talking about. I think he is like the best example of someone who is really comes off as very cool, and is like a completely like the awkwardest king of all nerds. You know?
Now, for your age, you're very young to be so obsessed and influenced by Bowie. So how did you get turned on to David Bowie? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt like for me, there's Bowie and then there's everything else, and I love to talk about music, and there's a lot of bands and musicians that I love and revere so much. But Bowie is really like the cornerstone, and it is the person to me who has like he's made the kind of total artwork that I aspire to, with the way he incorporates theater and film and fashion, and like everyone said about him a million times, but he's the one for me. And it really started, I grew up listening to music my mom listened to, and I was really actually like drawn to. I loved a lot of really folky singer-songwriters, and I loved people like when I was really a little baby, I loved Dar Williams. And I remember I met her a few years ago, and she was like, you're too cool to you're too cool to be someone who loved you. She's like, you don't look like my normal super fans. And I was like, no, you changed my life when I was so young. But yeah, so I loved singer-songwriters always, but I was kind of disdainful of a lot of the rock and roll music my mom loved, and it seemed like a lot of posturing to me, and I was kind of scared of like bands like the Velvet Underground and stuff. I was like, what are they? This is when I was really little, but I was kind of like, what are they talking about? What is this all? This all sounds rather heavy and sordid, and and it also was that, to me, my hatred of pop culture and everything, I was really, as a little kid, I was like, God, everything's about sex, sex, sex. I want to do this to you. I love you. Like, why are these adults so obsessed? And it was like, I was like, why does everything have to be about sex and romance? And there's more to life, and obviously being a kid, there was so much of that just went over my head, or that didn't, I didn't get it. And it was actually hearing Starman. And my mom always listened to Bowie, and it just hadn't hit me. And then one time I was in the car, and I heard Starman, maybe on the radio, I don't even know. Maybe she put it on. And she loves Bowie. She loves Bowie in the historically appropriate way. She went to see the Ziggy Stardust tour when she was 13, so she has the right relationship with Bowie. But I heard Starman, and to me it was the first music that linked that fantasy world of my childhood and imagination that was so rich with the adult world that was so sordid. So it was this was the link between the the darkness of the adult world and the magic of my childhood fantasy, I guess. And I got it, and before I was even enamored of him, it was just his words and the poetry that was so that it wasn't talking down, and that it was kind of validating without being childlike or twee or corny. He was validating the world of childhood, I guess.
Now, what's ironic and interesting is the very first rock and roll that I got into, and I got into it like a lot of kids do, older siblings record collections. Okay, so these were the bands. I actually wrote this down. These were the bands. Now, this is going to be very ironic and interesting. Okay, these by far were the very first bands that I had cassettes of, and I fell in love with rock and roll.
Yeah.
Alice Cooper, David Bowie, Mott the Hoople, and the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
I kid you not.
I get it.
So it's just weird that I'm here we are all these years later, and it's full circle of talking to you. It's bizarre.
It's and I've always been attracted to bands that have that. I was thinking about talking to you, and I was thinking about my relationship to rock music, and what about rock and roll is important to me, and what about it I just don't connect with. And it's like I've always gotten the most excited by rock music that has like that pastiche element or the fakeness to it. And even actually, I was thinking when I was talking about how I loved Bowie, you know, when I was a little kid, before I loved Bowie, I loved Little Richard, you know, like
Yeah.
there was never a time in my consciousness that I was not completely made insane by Little Richard, you know, like I remember seeing him on Sesame Street and being like,
Right.
that is the guy, like he is the king of the world, like I was just like, that's what life is all about.
Well, he
You
was
know,
like such a
whatever he's
rock
doing.
star and so ahead of his time in the sense of the clothes and the makeup, and the songs were just, you know, simple and rocking. So out of all those 50s cats that, you know, the main people you hear about, for me it was Little Richard as well.
He's
Lovely.
still so fresh, and and I think like I really need that humor element, you know, and it's not like that it's silly or fake, and that's kind of what I'm trying to rediscover now, I guess. But that like kind of like childlike anarchic insanity of him, like that's what about rock and roll I think is timeless and still affects me. And like, you know, when it gets it all self-serious, I just don't understand. It just is totally alien to me. And like, you know, it's like a lot of I really prefer like the British approach to rock, I guess. And I love all those like Britpop bands like Blur and Pulp, and like those bands had a huge influence on me. And it's like, you know, they might not be the rockinest, might not be like the hardest rockinest music, but the playfulness and the lightness and the irony and the levels of consciousness is like, that really gets me going, you know. I really need that. And that's like, I don't think that's just like a intellectual offshoot. I think that is like part of the core of rock and roll, back to Little Richard.
Right. All right, let's talk about your current album. It's a 4-song, whether we want to call it EP or episode 1, but it's 4 songs, and the more I listen to it, the better it gets. And also, you're welcome. I am very impressed with your work ethic. You have done a video for every single song on that album.
Well, one of them's a live video.
Well,
but
yeah,
still, yes,
but still,
yes.
you
There's
beat
a
me
video
to
for every
that,
song,
but
yeah.
still, yeah. Now, Use, I love that song. It is
me too.
such a great song. Now, I'm going to jump around here a little bit, because when you're doing a song, which I literally, you know, I was listening to your stuff, and then, you know, I really was absorbing it all morning because I knew I'd be talking to you. And the song that really, really kept bringing me back, surprisingly, and not because, and it's a great song, that's not why it's surprisingly, but No Transformation. And let me just say that when you're singing a song like No Transformation, you can hear how great of a voice that you have. And then when you're singing a song like Use, you can really hear your rock and roll attitude. You know, I don't want to say snarl, but,
Yeah.
you know, those are probably the 2 songs I love on there. And you know, quite honestly, you know, without going into it, No Transformation, I mean, to me, has meaning. I can relate to it. What can you tell me about that song, about, you know, how you wrote it, where you got the lyrics from?
Yeah, No Transformation. You know, that song is really important to me, and it was that song that made Jesse Malin, who produced the EP, it was that song that made him want to sign us and do the record. Yeah, so I think when I wrote it, I became aware of my own thought process, which was always something like, well, there's always time for me to reinvent myself, or I can always start something totally new. Or, you know, I had this fantasy of like, well, I can just disappear and then become a totally new version of myself and come back and kind of blow everyone's minds with this new person that I am. And I realized like that that I was always thinking that way, and that was crazy, and that you know, there is no time to start all over again. And I know, you know, every day is a new beginning, and you can start your day over at any time and all that stuff, and that's true. But at the same time, it's like my life is what it is, and it's what I've done, and you know, this is not a dress rehearsal for anything else, and I'm not gonna get like a fresh start, you know. And so I wrote that in that kind of moment of like reckoning, I guess, and then you know, started as kind of like an inventory of my own failings or something, and then I think by the end it turns around through repetition, and it becomes something hopeful. You know, if there's no time to change, you just are who you are, and that's that.
Now, would you be offended if someone said to you what they got out of it is reconciling and getting closure on a breakup?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Because for me, that's what it was. That's so I think
Yeah.
that, you know, I was like, wow, you know, this is like a breakup song, but
Yeah.
I don't want to, you know, offend you by saying that. So
No, and it was, you know, there was a relationship that was not a romantic relationship, but a creative partnership that I had at the time, and I was realizing how like draining it had become, and how unequal it had become,
mm-hmm.
and how painful it was just even relating to each other. And I kind of there was an element, there's elements of that in that song, because there was something I was really feeling like I can't be who I'll never be who I think you need me to be, or I'll never be who I think you think I should be. You know, and it was kind of giving up on that. Like, I can't be that person.
It's a very powerful song. It's definitely,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, you're the only thing that I want to use. I love that. And I love the video for that. Where did the inspiration for that come from?
And you know, it's like I probably have a million songs like that I wrote that because it's like that. I think that kind of format, that kind of like to me it's funny. I don't know if it's funny to anyone else, but it's like that kind of tongue-in-cheek, lighthearted, fun approach to writing just like a standard rock and roll song.
Yeah,
you know?
I got that out of it.
Like,
yeah,
and like that comes very naturally to me, and that definitely is something that's a result of like, you know, growing up with David and with his musical taste, and like listening to all that real old time rock and roll, you know, on his radio show and at home, and that stuff's really ingrained in me, so it comes very naturally to write songs in that form. That's a song that just came really effortlessly, and it's, you know, I'm someone who, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't have any kind of obvious vices, and
good for you.
Well, it's tricky because you find other ways. You find other ways to act out, and they get pretty creative, you know. And I've never felt like any kind of moral superiority about that decision. You know, it's complicated, and you know, it's not, because you know, you can still be pretty crazy without being fucked up on drugs, you know. And for me, like it's very, it's always been love is the drug. It's always been obsessive relationships, romantic and otherwise. Obsessed with people, obsessed with my relationships with people, and that song is really about using someone, and it's about, it's not, it's not like a totally positive love song. It's very much like it's looking at someone who has all the kind of so-called normal vices and normal outlets, and be like, look, you have all this to choose from to get you to that place, and all I have is you. So I'm going to use every bit of you. It's very cathartic to sing it, and I love to do that song live. And it always, people get it. It's not. There's nothing to not. There's no like. It's not like there's like some subtext you don't
Right.
get. Like people, you feel it and you get it, and it's like, okay.
Okay, I want to get to you singing live in a second, but I want to talk about Let's Pretend It's the 80s. That video, man, did you nail that video. I was cracking up. I'm like, did I just see the Human League on there? I'm like, was that Susie Sue that I saw?
Yeah.
The whole thing. And what made you come up with that?
That's very specific. That was that was a time me and my friends were we were like, there was one night that we went out to the Pyramid Club for an 80s night dance party, and I don't know if it was all the same night, but around the same time we were also at this diner in Midtown that has like a taste of the 80s menu, and they have like what is it, like cantaloupe with cottage cheese or some disgusting like 80s diner fare on the menu, and like a Cobb salad or some shit. And so we were like, we kept and like, it was also, I think the night we went to that diner, we had just done this performance art piece at MoMA that our friends had curated, and I was really like, who the fuck are we? Like, I just had this, again, I guess all these songs come from like a moment of self-awareness, but I really was like, what is this fake life we're living? Like, who do we think we are? Like, reenacting this 80s lifestyle, like doing some performance art at MoMA with our friends, and going out to the Pyramid Club. Like, this is not reality. Like, and it just felt like such an imitation of a lifestyle, and it was so, and I love living that way, and especially now I'm like, oh, what I would give for the days when I was like, spend money I didn't have to like take a cab to go to a gallery opening, like,
Right.
I love doing that. I love to do that. And I did love to do that. And so it was like thinking about kind of how we were all living, and then also looking around me at my whole generation and people younger than us, and seeing what an epidemic it was, and seeing how, in my view, these kids around me were living this illusion. We're living in this like illusion of a lifestyle, which was like an imitation of some fantasy of like a downtown art scene in the 80s. And, and just being aware of the economic reality of like, that part of this role play was a fantasy about wealth, and about, and even if it's imitating these like no wave hipsters who didn't necessarily have money at the time, it's imitating this youth culture, which would ultimately generate a lot of money for people.
Now, see, it's interesting you say that, because to me, living through the 80s, I thought all those people were fake to begin with, like the actual
Right.
80s people. I'm like, you're all,
Right.
I went home, like I stopped going to clubs, and, because I came up in the 70s, and then the 80s hit, and, new wave came in and it was all the crap on MTV like you did in that video. And
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
clubs, the rock bands disappeared and all the clubs had DJs. And I'm like sitting home on a Saturday night because I'm like, I want no part of this. It was just, they were all living fake. So
Yeah.
you and your friends living fake, recreating it was really more real than than you think.
Yeah, and I realized that, and it's, I think I really got at the essence of it, and I did always sense that was an illusion to begin with, and an illusion of like the capitalist dream of,
Sure.
limitless wealth
Oh
and
yeah, money
disposable
was
people.
flying
And
everywhere.
yeah, and and it's so crazy for people in our generation to kind of even play at that, because like we're the first downwardly mobile generation in however long, and we're the people who are going to make less money than our parents, and none of us are going to own houses, and that's just the reality of like the millennials. And so like for people my age and younger to be attracted to that like 80s excess was just so like, it was just such an interesting delusion, I thought.
Mm.
That also like, and it's also just really not about the 80s at all. It's really about like our, what I felt was like my culture and my scene, and the thing that meant the most to me about doing that song and that video was like that people in my community and like who I looked up to and other musicians and stuff were all kind of like, you nailed it about our world, like not about the 80s, but about our life.
Right.
Like that was what it was like at that point. So I think we did a good job with it.
You did a great job with it. The last song we did not talk about, "We Will Not Be Lovers," Waterboys cover. What made you cover that song? And I've read in the comments on the video of Waterboys fans really saying,
oh, they loved it.
they
oh my God.
loved it. Yeah.
that was the best. And and Mike Scott, who is the Waterboys, tweeted it actually, which I didn't see
Nice.
until like a week later. So I didn't have a heart attack in real time.
Yeah.
But like, I wish I had. But I love the Waterboys. I think they're one of the most like overlooked, underrated, greatest bands ever. I think he's just such a genius songwriter. And people know Hole of the Moon, but I don't think
Right.
People outside of England and Ireland, Scotland, like they don't really delve into that catalog so much. And EJ, who's in my band, like he always loved the Waterboys, so he really turned me on to them. And then my friends and I, we all went to see the Waterboys in Prospect Park at one of those band shows, and it was one of the best shows of my life.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. And like, it's always like an interesting thing going to see bands that are, not at their prime, shall we say, like
Yeah.
you want to call heritage acts or something.
Right.
But it was like, I don't think they could have been better 30 years ago. I mean, they were just the way they play together. I mean, I saw them again actually a couple years later. It was a terrible show, so it's it's not every single time, but with something great like that, when it's great, it's transcendent.
Mm.
And the fusion of the way they play together as a band and Mike Scott's lyrics and his singing, it was like it's cliche, but it was like a religious experience or something. It was just totally living poetry. And it's so funny when you see a show like that and you're like at the band shell with like, like a bunch of like Brooklyn yuppie parents,
Right.
and like old kind of like NPR people like sitting with their fanny packs, and it's like, the sun hasn't even set yet, and you're like eating some artisanal like $12 chipwich or something,
Right.
and like but then it doesn't matter, because just watching and hearing that band, you're just in this like Dionysian mystical craziness. So it was a funny show, but and so at that show they played that song "We Will Not Be Lovers," and I had heard the song, but not like I heard it that night. And I was just weeping at the,
Wow.
at the lyrics and his performance. And I didn't have a band at the time, and I just remember going home thinking like, God, if I could sing that song, and I've said this before, but it's like, if they had that song at karaoke, I probably would have like got it out of my system and just sung it a bunch, and then I wouldn't need to record it. But it's kind of an obscure song, so thank God they didn't have it at karaoke. But it was just like my fantasy to sing that song.
Okay,
And
cool.
yeah.
All right, let's talk about live. I've seen you play live. Now you're big on doing live stream events, and I read somewhere where you said that you almost prefer doing live stream to live audiences. And let me just say that you can fucking work a camera, okay? You know what you're doing. You get right into that. Do you think that by doing live stream, you can completely just be yourself and do it, as opposed to if there's an audience there and they're not really giving you the energy that
right.
you can feed back off of? Is that why you prefer live stream?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's a tricky thing. I think, look, there's nothing better than playing to a big audience of people going nuts. I mean, that's just the best, and you just completely lose consciousness. I completely lose consciousness.
Sure.
And if people are dancing and you're moving around and you're in the crowd, I mean, that's like its own transcendent thing. But that said, I can think of a few shows we've played like that, where if there was like a video of what actually happened, I don't know how like epic and amazing it would be, because there's something, I mean, maybe it would, I don't know, maybe I'm just doubting myself, but I think, and it's the same with theater. It's like there's a way you perform sometimes that's so in the moment and so responsive to the situation, that it might not even come across in a video, and I've had that happen too, like where I've been at a show that was amazing, and then I've like looked up a video on YouTube of it, and if it's not well captured, it doesn't come through a lot of the time.
Yeah.
What was so magical about it. I don't think that's always the case, but I think it's sometimes the case. And I think that with live streams, it's definitely an opportunity to be more precise and more intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely more conscious of like the movement and the singing, and because yeah, I'm working off of the camera. I'm not working off of the people, and it's much more precise, I guess. I think like there's something really joyful and fun about doing live streams, and it's more similar to doing a music video, but it's also just like there's stuff that the camera sees that an audience wouldn't see, and especially like, yeah, like getting really close up with the camera and seeing the face and showing your face. Like you don't have that as much in a club, even if you're like right up close to the people, because of the lights and whatever. You're not like looking into the person's eyes, so there's something really intimate about it, which I really like, and it's different. But I like it better than playing like, I think I prefer playing live streams to playing shows where like nobody's there to see you.
Sure.
And you know,
Right.
but that's weird too, because sometimes those shows are the best too, because you just go insane.
Yeah. You're
Like I
like,
kind of
screw it. Nobody's here anyway.
exactly, and like sometimes I would get pretty aggressive at those shows, and that would be fun. But I think live streams are a great opportunity, especially for artists like me who are uh, visual as well as musical, and like have some understanding or interest in film too. 'Cause
I
it's making
agree.
movies.
Yeah. I agree. I think it works well for you. Okay, last question. How I came about you was through your mom.
Mhm.
And I was doing a show. I interviewed a woman that runs an organization called Women Who Rock,
Mhm.
and she's basically, it's not just rock acts that she does, but she does a lot of like women's healthcare stuff and women in music and all that sort of thing. And some of the stuff she said is what I'm going to ask you about. But
Mhm.
I guess because I follow your mom and David on Instagram, I was quite surprised to get a message from your mom because I guess she sees my likes or whatever. I don't really comment anything on
Yeah.
Instagram. I just put likes. And your mom DM'd me and she said, you should really check out Leah. She's a great interview, blah, blah, blah. So it really came because I was doing this woman who rocks show.
Cool.
So what I want to ask you is that do you find any extra challenges being a woman in singing, acting, show business in general? Do you find that because you're a woman, you
Mhm.
sometimes get treated differently than a guy would?
I mean, yeah, I think anyone who thinks otherwise is in denial. I think that right now there's so much awareness about this stuff that guys are making an effort to to be more open, I guess, and kind of like examining their own behavior. So it's there's something shifting right now, and um, but I do think, yeah, definitely differently, treated differently. I think a lot of it is it's hard to separate. It's hard to separate what how people treat me actively from like internalized ways that I treat myself because of
Mm.
years of being a woman. And a lot of the stuff that's the hardest that I struggle with now is stuff that stuff that I'm perpetuating in myself that isn't even being reinforced externally. So it's it's hard. It's hard to take apart. Um, I think that I think that I think especially just to zero in on one particular thing, I think that as a singer, as a woman, I think you're either expected to be a quote unquote great singer, which is like a very narrowly defined kind of virtuoso thing. And I think it often is rather, it's like, there's like an idea about soulfulness that is like pretty shallow, I think. But there's an idea of what a beautiful female voice should sound like, and what a woman who's a great singer and what that is, and it's pretty specific. And if you fall short of that, then you're something else entirely. And I think I think that for men, there's a huge range of what being a great singer is like. Like Bob Dylan is a great singer. He's a great singer. He's pitchy and he's doesn't have much of a range, but he's
Hmm.
so emotive and communicative. And I think for women, there's way fewer spaces to exist in as a singer. There's way fewer voices that get heard. And if you have someone uh, like Marianne Faithfull, when she was, an
Sure.
older Marianne Faithfull, like that's like a rare deviant voice that's more like how a man would be allowed to sing, I guess. And I notice, for me as a singer, if I'm singing prettily, I guess, then people might talk about having a nice voice, but that a lot of the time at clubs and stuff when I would play live, I would notice people kind of trying to put me into a category and be like, you must love Riot Girl. Like, I bet you love Kathleen Hanna. And I was like, yeah, sure, I love Kathleen Hanna. I love La Tigra, but that's not where I'm coming from at all. That's not like someone who's singing I've tried to emulate. But I just think that there's like a real, this is like the nicest way to answer that question. It's like the least brutal way. But I think like,
oh, please go brutal. I'm fine with that.
No, but I think just for example, I think that's like one small example of, I think that for women, either you have a great voice or you can't sing, and there's not a lot in between. And I think I think that really blocks a lot of women who have something to say in music from getting into music. Women who have much more interesting perspectives or like varied influences, they think because they don't sing like Adele or Beyonce or something that they're not singers. Whereas with men, that's rarely the case. Like, you've got, especially in rock, there's like a million voices. And in rock, and with men, like, there's so much less, like someone like, my favorite hard rock person is David Lee Roth.
Okay, that's interesting.
David Lee Roth is like such, I could go on, but he is like such a life-saving, iconic force to me, because like his exuberance and joyfulness and like irony and lack of irony, he's just so far out and such a fucking genius performer, and I love him.
He is. I couldn't agree more.
Oh my god, his music videos are like my favorite videos ever. Yeah. He is just like the antidote to all of the self-doubt and ennui and everything. I fucking love him, and he is someone who is an amazing singer, but some people could say he's a terrible singer. Like, some people do. Yeah. And some people do. And, and he's someone who has such a unique voice, and actually has, I've thought about this a lot, he has like a unique relationship with pitch. He just has, it's like he has some kind of microtonality in his voice that is just different from other singers like him, and he's got a weird voice, and he is encouraged and allowed and celebrated for his particular vocalization, and I think for women, there aren't so many female David Lee Roths, there's like Janice and there's Bjork, and
right.
But there's not so many, outside of like really weird art music and stuff. I don't know, there's not that much space for that. So that's like a whole tangent, but that's something that I think is different, how your voice gets talked about, how people talk to you about that part of your music.
That's a very interesting take on it.
Yeah, because like there's, and I think that that's like a part of a bigger problem, I guess. But obviously, also everything every woman has ever said about how it's hard is true. And when I was in my first band Makeout, I remember I was talking to someone involved in the band about our image and how we present ourselves and stuff, and he was like, he would say things like, well, I guess like if you're not gonna be like slutty, I guess our thing that sets us apart is that you're not sexual. And I like and it's like comments like that, right? And it's not just comments, but stuff like that over the years. I think for women, the comment about the voice, it's linked to sexuality as well. I think that, like, for men, in rock especially, the way that there's so many ways to express sexuality and desire and attractiveness, and for women it persists that either you're being sexy and provocative, or you're being, you know, no fun, serious, uptight, frumpy, whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, you have a very
little
good point.
between.
You have
There's
a
very
very
little in between.
yeah.
And I think like that. I think that is that kind of conversation comes up at every instance, every time, in the studio, playing shows, doing everything. It's constant, you know. And I think that women are really, like, I think that we have like a real, even now when there's so many more women getting into music and getting into, you know, rock music too, there's so many great girl-fronted bands and, you know, female-led musical movements and stuff. But I think that conversation about voice and sexuality is still like so, it's such baby steps towards any kind of real change.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very interesting answer and very interesting, you know, outlook on it by far. You know, like I told this woman, Melinda Khaleesi is her name. I said, you know, I never really, and obviously I'm in the minority, I said, I never really differentiated that, well, she's good for a girl and for a girl singer. To me, it was just all the same. It's all music to me. And, you know, that sort of opened my eyes to where I'm like, okay, you know, you need to pay more attention and, you know, to not so much your, you know, not so much my outlook on it, but everybody else's, you know, and try to open their eyes. So
yeah, and it's so weird too, because it's like, I don't know, I was talking to David recently about how much of an influence Janis Joplin had on him, and how much he loves Janis, and how he, like, you know, he would, like, he didn't quite stalk her, but he went to like every show of hers he could go to and places where she'd be, and, you know, he like worshipped her. And for him, Janis was the image of the rock star. Like, that's what a rock star was to him, was Janis Joplin.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because let me just see if I can pull this up really quick. He was just mentioned in an article about that.
He's a real Janis champion, and is definitely the reason that I love her the way I do. But, you know, it's like, you know, I think that the idea of the archetype of the rock star as being a feminized man is like, it's like a later kind of construct, you know. And I think, like, when, like, for David, that definitely wasn't the case, you know. Like, it's like, that's not the default for him. But I think for, you know, for most people it still is. And, you know, women in that role are kind of the exception.
And I mean, he sings, for years he sang, oh, help me, what song?
He still sings Piece of My Heart.
Thank you.
He still sings Piece of My Heart. He kills that song.
Hang on, I'm scrolling down. Go ahead.
No, and I was really trying to ask him, like, did you want to be Janis? Like, were you, like, trying to get him to, I was trying to, like, push him to say that, like, the reason he started, like, wearing women's clothes and dressing more femininely was, like, to be like Janis. And he was like, no, that's not the reason. But I was like, but that would be such a simple answer if it was. But he's,
yeah,
you know,
no, it was, I think it was
complex.
all more of, like, you know, the movement at the time.
It was more his friends and the world he was in. But
which I was so heavily into, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so into glam, glitter. Like, to me, growing up that way, a band had to have a look.
Yeah,
And to this day, I hate when bands just come out wearing black. It's like, yo, dude, like
I
you're an
know.
opening act. You don't really have a lot of lights, and you
Yeah,
look like the guy that just waited on me in Home Depot.
I
And
know.
I just think, I don't know if that's because I was raised on, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, where the hell can I
No,
find?
and that's the thing, and that's why, for me, actually getting into David Lee Roth when I did, it was like such a liberation because, like, I feel like the specter of grunge never really left, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Nirvana, and I always loved Nirvana. I love, Kurt Cobain is like, one of the best songwriters and so endlessly inspiring and blah, blah, blah. But I think that the culture around grunge and, it, you know, not like looking like you don't care and not putting on a show and, kind of cultivating power through through not caring, or cultivating power through detachment, or like catatonic detachment or whatever, like that had such an impact on culture and on music, and it's still cool. The kids still think that's cool, and especially now with this like 90s resurgence, although I think it's a little more feminine this time around. But like, hearing David Lee Roth talk about how like Kurt Cobain like killed the fun of music, I was like, wow, that's such an interesting perspective, because I always grew up with this like rock journalist perspective, which was like Nirvana was the last great band.
Yeah, and you know what? I see it both ways. That Nirvana
Me
was the
too.
last great band, and that it kind of killed it. Um,
Right.
and I've had that conversation with my friends because I loved a lot of these grunge bands, but going back to the '80s where everybody was like yeehaw party and everything was great, and then here comes the '90s and it's like
Mhm.
a down, a lot of these bands downer, I want to kill myself and blah blah blah, and I was like, do you think like that was really like the end of it?
Right.
So I just found this. This was actually put out by Janis Joplin's Facebook page, and it said, um, when Led Zeppelin came to the States, I think Janis was a definite influence on Robert Plant.
Mhm.
Also, David Johansen of the New York Dolls was a big fan, and oh wait, it's like my, um, also, David Johansen of the New York Dolls was a huge fan, and Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. She's been gone 50 years and had a big influence on both male and female performers. And that
Mhm.
was from, I don't know who this person is, Holly George Warren. So there you go.
Yeah, I think she definitely um I think she definitely was like his biggest influence in terms of like being that kind of performer,
Mm. Now,
you
okay.
know.
So speaking of David, what? Tell me about this interview or
Oh
what it is
yeah,
you're
I
doing
mean,
with him.
it's it's I don't know if this is like not something I'm supposed to talk
Well, I don't
about.
know.
I don't
I won't
no,
air it.
I don't think it no, I don't think it is. I think it's fine, but it's uh so Martin Scorsese is
Yes,
doing
I'm
a
well aware.
documentary. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so because of COVID, um the production team asked me to do the interviews with David because they didn't want to send in an a an alien person into their pod, especially when we were in like extreme lockdown. It just wasn't logistically sound, and they didn't want to interview him on Zoom or something.
Sure.
And and I have a background in film, and I um, know my way around a camera in
Yeah.
theory, and but
And a
so
background in David.
right, and I know a lot about David, and it it was we're all so glad that things worked out this way, because um, David is as kind of performative and delightful an interview subject as he can be, he's also rather guarded. And I think he's talking to me. It's an ongoing process. I think we're still doing interviews, but he's been talking to me, I think, in a way that I don't think he would have talked to, Scorsese, I guess.
Sure.
I think he's like, we're going pretty deep. I don't know how much of the interviews are going to end up being in the film, but we've done many, many hours, and it's just been such a gift, especially in this time, to like have that as a project and to have like that excuse and opportunity to like go really deep with David about his story, because there's a lot of threads that have gotten lost in telling by other people, and just hearing what he's interested in about his own life and what he thinks is important. It's pretty surprising, and I just think he has like such an interesting story that really hasn't been told, even though he's been in the public life in one way or another since he was like a teenager.
Yeah.
So we've gone like pretty deep, and it's been really like eye-opening and amazing. And and getting to work with Scorsese is just completely insane, but that's how life is sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you, David has been on my wish list for years, but there's a part of me that's like, I'm kind of afraid to talk to him because he's so musically deep that I was like, I don't know, how far can I, because again, I mean, I think I was like, I don't even know, like 10 or 11 when I saw when I heard the Dolls.
Yeah.
And of course they disbanded, and I used to go see them solo all the time.
Yeah.
And then when they got back together in 2004, Someday It Will Please Us to Remember Even This, I thought was a phenomenal album.
Phenomenal. So overlooked. Yeah.
I said, you know what? Even though it's just him and Syl, I'm in. And I went to every single show that they played in New York, because for me, as a little kid, never getting to see them, it was just, it was phenomenal. So,
And they really think I think David would probably say that those shows were better than any shows they ever played in the past.
Well, let's face facts. They were more, he was playing with much better musicians.
Yeah.
Everybody wasn't all strung out, they were phenomenal shows. Any timeline on that? I mean, I know it got pushed back.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm involved in the production and I have no idea. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens. It's going to be, there's a lot of material, and it's pretty rich, and I trust them wholeheartedly. I think they're doing an amazing job. I have no idea when it'll come out, but David is, it's so funny. He was just telling me he was doing an interview, and he was like, yeah, I was talking about you the whole time in the interview, and now I'm talking about him the whole time in the interview. We're both like, we're being interviewed about ourselves, and we're like, yeah, he's doing a great job. But he's like been, he had that new, he had a song come out this summer.
I know all about it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's getting back into recording some stuff, so hopefully we'll have something to promote, from him.
Yeah, because I'd love to talk to him, and I really wanted to, avoid as much as I could that subject, him talking to you, because I'm like, she's got her own thing going,
Yeah, but it's funny because I used to be so much more like, really, do we have to talk about David? Like, I'm a fucking adult. I do my own thing. Like, but I think now, especially, like everyone in these times, reevaluating what's important, who's really important in my life. And David and I are, like, David's a huge influence on me, and we're in dialogue, and we have been for, so many years with our work. And he's at one place in his career, and I'm in another place, but, like, you know, we've always talked about what we're both doing, and I think we've been an influence on each other for many, many years. So it's like, it feels a little silly or dishonest to be like, don't talk about David. I mean, if it wasn't for David, I probably would have found a different outlet for what I do.
Well, that being said, you clearly stand on your own 2 feet, and
Thank you. Yes.
you're welcome. And this is what I wanted to tell you, before we wrap, because I have a feeling you have somewhere to go. Because you said before 4, you have to do this.
Oh,
Before
yeah.
4. I am extremely impressed with you at how well read you are. I was reading some stuff. I'm like, I don't even know what the hell she's talking about. Books she read and this and that. I'm like, I don't even know what she's talking about because, I'm not the most educated person by far. And, just everything about you, you're, like I said, very well read, your acting, your directing, your ambition, and this album. And, again, I'm a hard rock guy, but I'm like, man, I could see this. I can hear this. This is really good stuff. Your videos out there, you got swagger, you got it going on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. I think, and I hope, hope a lot more to come very soon.
I will definitely, stay on this. And the next time you have more stuff, I'd love to have you back on, Leah.
I'd love to. It was so great talking to you. And it was
great
really,
talking to you. You're a
really
great.
Really great questions. And it really, like I said before, it really is like, it's really like doing this when it's good. It really is like therapy or something. You end up like seeing your life in a different perspective. And you're like, oh, wow, I really.
Well, thank you for saying that, because when somebody says to me really good questions, then I feel like I've done my job.
You really did. Really good. Really, very attentive. It was great.
All right, good. I'll be watching out for you.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much, Jay. This was great.
All right, Leah, same here.
Bye.
All right.